I'm Brandon, 32 years old, and I still remember the exact moment I finally stood up to my family. It was at my parents' 35th anniversary party last spring. I arrived with excitement and a carefully chosen gift, only to be directed to the garage while everyone else enjoyed proper seating inside. My mother's casual explanation still rings in my ears. It's just for extended family. I looked around. Everyone else had a seat, even my cousin who stole from them. So I picked up my gift, turned around and said, "Extend this." My father ran after me in front of everyone. If you're watching this and have ever felt like the black sheep of your family, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. My story might show you exactly what to do when you've finally had enough. Growing up in suburban Boston, I believed we were the perfect American family. My father, Thomas, was a successful investment banker who worked 60-hour weeks, but always made it home for Sunday dinners. My mother, Diane, ran her own interior design business, transforming the homes of wealthy clients while keeping our own house impeccably decorated. We lived in a colonial-style home with a manicured lawn and hosted neighborhood barbecues every summer. I was the middle child sandwiched between my older sister Amy and younger brother Kevin. Amy was always the golden child, straight-A student who went on to Harvard Medical School and became a cardiologist by 30. She married another doctor, had 2 perfect children, and bought a house 3 streets away from our parents. Kevin, 5 years younger than me, was the athletic star who followed in our father's footsteps. Football quarterback and high school business degree from Boston College, and then straight into our father's firm where he quickly climbed the corporate ladder. And then there was me. From an early age I was drawn to the arts, particularly photography. I would spend hours with my first camera, a birthday gift from my uncle, capturing light patterns in our backyard or portraits of neighborhood kids. My parents initially supported this as a nice hobby, but made it clear they expected me to grow out of it and pursue something practical. "Brandon, photography is fine for weekends, but you need a real career," my father would say whenever I showed him a new photograph I was proud of. By high school, when I was winning regional photography contests, their support had transformed into tolerance. The tension became more pronounced during my senior year when college applications were due. My portfolio had been accepted at several prestigious art schools, but my parents pushed me toward business programs. After weeks of arguments, we compromised on a marketing degree with a photography minor at NYU. I thought this would finally make them proud, but instead it became the first major crack in our relationship. College years were a series of phone calls discussing my grades in marketing classes, while barely acknowledging my growing success in photography. Every summer when I returned home, family conversations revolved around Amy's medical achievements or Kevin's internships at prestigious firms. My photography exhibitions received brief obligatory mentions before the topic changed. After graduation, I moved permanently to New York and built a respectable career in commercial and art photography. I landed campaigns with major brands and had my work featured in galleries. Each achievement was met with the same response from my parents. "That's nice, but is it stable? Or have you thought about using your marketing degree more?" The pattern of subtle exclusion at family gatherings began around this time. At Thanksgiving, I noticed my place setting was at the kids' table, while cousins younger than me sat with the adults. During Christmas gift exchanges somehow always left me with the generic gift card, while others received thoughtful, personal presents. At Kevin's graduation party, I was assigned to take photos rather than being included in the family celebrations. I made countless attempts to gain their approval. When my first major solo exhibition opened in Manhattan, I flew them in, paid for a luxury hotel, and gave them the VIP treatment. They attended for 45 minutes, mainly commenting on how unusual the crowd was and asking if I had considered more commercial work. 5 years ago, during the economic downturn, my father's investment firm struggled. Without telling anyone else in the family, I liquidated my savings and loaned them $60,000 to help keep their house. The money was eventually repaid, but the sacrifice was never truly acknowledged beyond a brief thanks for helping out during that rough patch. Last year, I won the National Contemporary Photography Award, one of the highest honors in my field. The recognition came with a $100,000 grant and a feature in every major art publication. When I called my parents with the news, my mother said, "That's wonderful, honey. Did you hear Amy just became head of cardiology? The disappointment stung, but I swallowed it as I had for years. Despite everything, I maintained regular visits home and called weekly. Each trip to Boston, each family gathering, I arrived with hope that this time would be different. This time they would see me as successful in my own right. This time I would finally feel like a valued member of the family rather than an obligation they had to acknowledge. So when the invitation arrived for their 35th anniversary party, I viewed it as another opportunity for connection. They had rented an event space initially but decided to host at their home instead to make it more intimate. I marked my calendar, booked time off work, and began searching for the perfect gift that might finally make them see me. The morning of the anniversary party, I woke up before dawn in my New York apartment to prepare for the 3-hour drive to Boston. I had spent weeks tracking down a rare vintage photograph of the small Italian coastal town where my parents had honeymooned 35 years ago. The photographer was moderately famous in the 70s, and this particular black and white print captured the exact cliffside restaurant where my father had proposed. I'd had it professionally framed with a custom mat board and written a heartfelt note to accompany it. The gift had cost nearly $2,000, but I was certain it would finally break through the wall between us. I dressed carefully in a tailored navy suit I had purchased specifically for the occasion. The weather forecast predicted rain, but the June morning dawned clear and bright as I loaded my overnight bag and carefully protected gift into my car. Traffic was light on the drive north, and I used the time to rehearse conversations in my head, imagining my parents' faces when they opened my gift. Pulling into the familiar neighborhood around 2 o'clock, I noted cars already lining both sides of the street. The celebration wasn't scheduled to begin until 4, but clearly some guests had arrived early. The front yard had been transformed with white roses and silver ribbons marking the path to the door, and a professionally printed banner reading, "Congratulations, Thomas and Diane. 35 wonderful years," hung across the porch. My father opened the door before I could knock his face, breaking into what seemed like a genuine smile. "Brandon, you made it. Come in, come in." He clapped me on the shoulder and ushered me inside. "Your mother's in the kitchen finishing up the hors d'oeuvre. You can put your gift on the table in the living room with the others." This warm welcome gave me hope. Perhaps this milestone had softened something in them. Perhaps today would be different. The house had been transformed. The furniture in the living room had been rearranged to accommodate 3 large round tables covered in silver tablecloths with elaborate centerpieces. The dining room held another 2 tables equally elegant. Professional-looking place cards were arranged at each setting, alongside fine china and crystal glasses. The effect was stunning and clearly expensive. I placed my carefully wrapped gift on a table already crowded with presents and made my way toward the kitchen to greet my mother. On the way, I ran into several relatives I hadn't seen in years. My father's brother, Uncle Robert, and his wife cousins from my mother's side, and some family friends who had known my parents since college. In the kitchen, my mother was directing a small army of caterers while adding final touches to a tray of canapés. When she saw me, she briefly paused. "Brandon, you're early." She wiped her hands on a towel and gave me a quick hug. "Your sister is in the backyard with her kids. Kevin hasn't arrived yet." "No, glad you could make it, or you look nice, or thank you for coming all this way. Just information about my siblings and an implicit suggestion that I should go elsewhere. The place looks amazing, Mom. Can I help with anything?" I offered. No, the caterers have it under control. Just make yourself comfortable until everyone arrives." She turned back to the staff, effectively dismissing me. I wandered to the backyard, where Amy was supervising her twin 6-year-olds on the swing set. She waved when she saw me. "Hey, stranger, long drive?" She gave me a warmer hug than our mother had. "Not too bad. Place looks incredible. Mom and Dad must have gone all out." Amy nodded. "Mom's been planning for months. The seating arrangements alone took weeks to figure out. She was very specific about who sits where." Something in her tone made me uneasy, but before I could ask more, my nephew and niece noticed me and ran over for hugs and to show me their new toys. We spent the next hour catching up as more guests arrived. Amy's husband joined us, and we discussed their recent vacation to Florida and my upcoming exhibition in Chicago. As 4 o'clock approached, guests began migrating indoors. The caterers had set up a bar in the corner of the living room, and servers circulated with trays of appetizers. I accepted a glass of champagne and mingled, catching up with relatives and meeting new faces. My father's golf buddies, my mother's friends from her book club, neighbors I didn't recognize. I spotted Cousin Jackson across the room, engaged in animated conversation with my mother. Jackson, my father's sister's son, had been caught stealing my grandmother's silver and several family heirlooms 5 years ago, which he then pawned for gambling money. There had been a massive family blow-up, but apparently all was forgiven now, as my mother laughed at whatever story he was telling. As the house filled with guests, I noticed people beginning to look for their seats at the tables. A small table near the fireplace held a chart showing the seating arrangements. I approached it, scanning for my name among the elegant calligraphy. Table 1 held my parents, Amy and her husband Kevin, and his girlfriend, and my father's brother and his wife. Tables 2 through 5 contained various arrangements of relatives, close friends, and neighbors. My name wasn't there. I rechecked each table, thinking perhaps I had missed it. Nothing. A flutter of anxiety rose in my chest, but I pushed it down. There must be a mistake, perhaps a last-minute change. Just then, my mother appeared at my elbow. "Brandon, there you are. We're about to start seating people for dinner." She took my arm and began leading me not toward any of the tables I had seen, but toward the door to the garage. "We've had to make some adjustments with the seating. I've set you up in here." My mother opened the door to the garage, and the smell of motor oil and lawn fertilizer immediately replaced the aroma of gourmet food and floral arrangements from the main house. The concrete floor was swept, but still stained with oil spots from years of parked vehicles. My father's car had been moved out to the driveway to create space, but the walls were still lined with shelving units, holding tools, seasonal decorations, and boxes labeled with various family members' names. The washing machine and dryer stood in one corner next to a utility sink. In the center of this utilitarian space was a small card table with a single folding chair. A paper plate, plastic cup, and wrapped plastic utensils sat on top. No tablecloth, no centerpiece, no place card, just the bare minimum needed to eat a meal. "We ran out of space in the main areas," my mother explained, straightening the paper plate. "It's just for extended family anyway. The important thing is that you're here to celebrate with us." I stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. Extended family, I was their son. Their literal, immediate family. "I'm sure it's only for the meal," she continued, filling the silence. "You can join everyone for the toasts and cake afterward." She patted my arm and turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Oh, we're serving the main course in about 20 minutes. The servers know to bring you a plate out here." The door closed behind her, and I remained standing, staring at the folding chair that apparently represented my place in this family celebration. Through the small window in the garage door, I could see into the dining room where guests were now taking their assigned seats. Cousin Jackson, who had stolen and pawned family heirlooms, was being seated at table 2 with a linen napkin placed in his lap by a server. The neighbors who had only moved in 2 years ago were at table 3. My mother's yoga instructor, a woman I had never met, was shown to a seat at table 4. I sat down heavily on the folding chair, the metal cold even through my suit pants. The contrast was so stark, so undeniable, that I couldn't even pretend this was normal. This wasn't about space constraints. This was a message clear as day. You don't belong with the rest of us. The garage door opened again, and a server appeared with a paper plate containing significantly smaller portions than I had glimpsed on the china plates inside. He placed it awkwardly on the card table, mumbled, "Enjoy your meal," and retreated quickly, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. As I stared at the cooling food, a memory surfaced from my high school graduation party. While classmates and their families celebrated in our backyard, I had been repeatedly pulled away to take photos, fetch supplies, or help in the kitchen. By the time I finally sat down to eat, the food was nearly gone, and the celebration had moved on without me. I had dismissed it as poor planning then, but now I recognized it as part of a pattern. Through the window, I could see my family laughing, clinking glasses, and enjoying the gourmet meal on fine china. My father stood to make a toast, and everyone raised their crystal glasses. In the garage, I had a plastic cup of lukewarm water. I strained to hear the conversations through the door, catching fragments about family bonds and treasured memories. Then I distinctly heard my name mentioned by a relative. "Where's Brandon? I haven't seen him since the beginning of the party." My mother's reply floated through clearly. "Oh, you know Brandon. Always a bit difficult to accommodate. He's particular about his space." My father added something I couldn't quite catch, followed by laughter from several guests. Then my sister's voice sounding slightly uncomfortable. "He's actually in the garage." More muffled conversation followed, but I had heard enough. The plate of food remained untouched as I grappled with the reality of my position in this family. For years I had made excuses for their behavior, always assuming that the problem must be with me, that I wasn't trying hard enough, wasn't successful enough in ways they valued, wasn't making enough effort to fit into their world. Through the window, I watched Jackson accept a second serving of prime rib on his china plate. Jackson, who had stolen from our grandmother and broken her heart in her final years. Jackson, who had never apologized or made restitution. Jackson, who fit their image of family better than their own son. It was in that moment, sitting on a folding chair in a garage, while my parents celebrated 35 years of marriage with everyone but me, that something finally broke. Not my heart, that had been breaking in small pieces for years. What broke was my willingness to accept this treatment any longer. I sat in the garage for exactly 7 minutes, watching the second-hand tick on my watch. In those 7 minutes, I mentally cataloged every instance of exclusion, every dismissal, every time my achievements had been minimized while others were celebrated. The pattern was so clear now that I couldn't believe I had missed it for so long, or rather that I had seen it but chosen to ignore it, always hoping for change. I stood up, straightened my tie, and brushed off my suit. The decision felt surprisingly calm, almost inevitable. After 32 years, I was finally going to advocate for myself. Walking from the garage back into the main house, I passed through the kitchen where servers were preparing dessert plates. They glanced at me curiously but said nothing. I continued into the dining room where animated conversations flowed around tables of well-fed guests enjoying wine and company. As I entered, a momentary hush fell over the nearest table. My presence seemed to create a ripple effect as conversations paused and heads turned. My mother, who was circulating among the guests, spotted me and quickly moved in my direction, clearly intent on intercepting me before I could reach the main gathering. "Brandon, is everything okay? Did you need something?" Her voice was low, her smile fixed for the benefit of watching guests. "Actually, Mom, I have a question." I kept my voice level matching her volume, but making no effort to move to a more private location. "I'm wondering why I'm the only person seated in the garage." She blinked rapidly, the fixed smile never wavering. "We've been over this, honey. We had space constraints with the seating." "Space constraints," I repeated, looking pointedly at the 5 tables arranged around us. "Yet Jackson is seated at table 2. The neighbors who moved in 2 years ago are at table 3. Your yoga instructor is at table 4. By now, more conversations had stalled as people pretended not to listen while obviously straining to hear. My father noticed the disturbance and made his way over, champagne glass in hand. "What's going on?" he asked, looking between my mother and me. "Brandon is having some concerns about the seating," my mother said quickly. "I'm not having concerns, Dad. I'm asking why, as your son, I'm eating off a paper plate in the garage while distant acquaintances enjoy china and crystal in here." My father's expression hardened. "Now is not the time, Brandon. We've made accommodations for everyone as best we could. If you have issues with the arrangements, we can discuss them tomorrow." Accommodations. I felt a calm clarity I had never experienced before. Let's talk about accommodations. When I graduated college with honors, you accommodated me by focusing the entire dinner conversation on Amy's medical school acceptance. When I won my first National Photography Award, you accommodated me by changing the subject to Kevin's promotion. When I loaned you $60,000 during the recession, which neither Amy nor Kevin were in a position to do, you accommodated me by barely acknowledging it ever happened. A complete silence had fallen over the nearby tables. My mother's smile had vanished, replaced by a look of mortification. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "Brandon, you're making a scene," he hissed. This is our anniversary celebration. Yes, it is. 35 years of marriage and raising 3 children, only 2 of whom apparently deserve a seat at the table. I turned slightly now, addressing not just my parents, but the gathered guests as well. For anyone wondering, I've been seated in the garage. Not because there's no room, as you can all see there's plenty of space. Not because I arrived late. I was here 2 hours early to help set up, but because in this family some people matter, and some don't. Amy had now risen from her seat, her expression a mixture of shock and what might have been dawning recognition. Kevin looked deeply uncomfortable, staring at his plate. "Brandon, please," my mother said, reaching for my arm. "You're embarrassing yourself." I stepped back from her touch. "No, Mom. For the first time in my life, I'm not embarrassing myself. I'm standing up for myself. There's a difference." I walked through the silent room to the gift table where my carefully wrapped present sat. Picking it up, I turned back to face my parents who stood frozen in the center of the room. "I spent weeks finding the perfect gift for you. It's a rare print of Positano, specifically the restaurant where Dad proposed. The photographer died last year, making this one of the few remaining original prints." I paused, looking around at the gathering of people who had been deemed more important than me. "But I've realized something today. You can't claim to celebrate 35 years of family while excluding 1/3 of that family." I extended the gift slightly, then pulled it back. "You said the garage was for extended family. Well, here's something to extend." I tucked the package under my arm, turned toward the door, and clearly enunciated, "Extend this." The collective gasp was audible as I walked toward the front door. I had made it halfway down the front path when I heard the door slam open behind me. "Brandon," my father's voice boomed across the yard. "Get back here right now." I continued walking toward my car. "Don't you dare walk away from your mother and me, not after everything we've done for you." I turned then, aware that we had an audience. Several guests had moved to the windows, and a few had even stepped onto the porch to witness the confrontation. "What exactly have you done for me, Dad? Besides, make it clear at every opportunity that my choices, my career, and my life don't measure up to your expectations. We put you through college. We supported you while you pursued this photography hobby. I had a partial scholarship to NYU, worked 30 hours a week throughout college, and graduated with $20,000 in student loans that I paid off myself. And photography isn't my hobby, it's my career. A successful one that you've never once shown genuine interest in." My father stepped closer, lowering his voice, though still clearly audible to those watching. "You've always been so sensitive, so quick to take offense. We've walked on eggshells around you for years. If asking to be treated with the same respect as everyone else makes me sensitive, then yes, I guess I am." I unlocked my car door. "Enjoy the rest of your anniversary. I won't be back to ruin any more family gatherings. If you leave now, Brandon." He didn't finish the threat, but the implication was clear. "If I leave now, what? You'll exclude me from family events, seat me in the garage, ignore my accomplishments, treat me as less important than a cousin who stole from you. What exactly would change, Dad?" For once in his life, my father seemed at a loss for words. Behind him on the porch, I spotted Amy pushing through the cluster of onlookers. She called out my name, but I had already slid into the driver's seat. As I pulled away from the curb, I caught a final glimpse in my rearview mirror. My father standing rigid in the middle of the front yard. My mother now beside him with one hand covering her mouth, and Amy hurrying down the path towards them. The perfect family portrait minus one member. The first hour of the drive back to New York passed in a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, and I barely registered the familiar highways and exits. The adrenaline from the confrontation gradually faded, leaving me hollow, but somehow lighter, as if I'd set down a burden I'd been carrying for decades. Around Hartford, my phone began buzzing with incoming messages. I ignored it until I stopped for gas, then scrolled through the notifications. 6 missed calls from Amy, 3 from Kevin, and 1 from my father. Text messages from various relatives expressing either concern or disapproval. An especially cutting one from my aunt. Your behavior was inexcusable. Your parents deserve an apology. I silenced my phone and continued driving, arriving at my apartment just after 9. The city lights and familiar sounds of Manhattan traffic felt comforting after the emotional turbulence of the day. My neighbor Trevor spotted me unloading my overnight bag and raised an eyebrow at my early return. "Thought you were in Boston until tomorrow." "Change of plans," I replied, not ready to discuss what had happened. "Well, Julia and I are having a few friends over for drinks if you want to join once you've settled in." Trevor and Julia, the couple across the hall, had become close friends over the years. They were creative professionals like me, Trevor a graphic designer and Julia a writer, who understood the value of artistic careers in ways my family never had. An hour later, showered and changed into comfortable clothes, I found myself on their couch with a much-needed whiskey in hand, finally telling the story of what had happened. "The garage, they seated you in the garage," Julia's indignation was validating, "while everyone else was inside. That's beyond insulting." Trevor shook his head. "Man, I'm sorry. That's messed up. The craziest part is that until today, I would have found a way to excuse it," I admitted. "I've been making excuses for them my entire life." Their other friends arrived, and though I initially planned to leave, Julia insisted I stay. "You shouldn't be alone tonight. Besides, we're all artists here. We all have stories about families who don't understand our choices." The evening turned into an impromptu therapy session as everyone shared tales of familial disappointment and misunderstanding. By midnight, I felt less alone in my experience, though my situation seemed extreme even in this company of misunderstood creatives. Back in my apartment, I finally checked my phone again. Amy had left 3 voicemails, each progressively more concerned. I listened to the most recent. "Brandon, please call me back. Things got really intense after you left. Mom locked herself in their bedroom. Dad's been pacing and muttering about ingratitude, and Kevin and I are trying to figure out what to do with 50 guests who don't know where to look. But that's not important. I'm worried about you. What happened today wasn't right. Call me okay." I sent her a brief text. "I'm home safe. Need space. We'll call tomorrow." Sleep didn't come easily that night. I kept replaying moments from the party, mentally extending the timeline backward through years of similar incidents I had normalized or explained away. By morning, my emotional exhaustion had transformed into a strange calm. I called into the studio where I had a shoot scheduled, asking my assistant to handle it, then spent the day in silent reflection. Amy called around noon. "Are you okay?" "Depends on your definition of okay." "I get that." She hesitated. "Look, I need to say something. I should have spoken up yesterday when I saw where they had put you. I knew it was wrong, but I just didn't want to cause problems." "You've never been the one causing problems, Amy. You've been the solution, the success story, the one who did everything right according to them." "That's not fair," she said, but without heat. "I've just made different choices. Choices they approved of. There's a difference." She was quiet for a moment. "Maybe. But I want you to know that Kevin and I talked a lot last night after everyone left, about patterns we've all been blind to, about how differently they've treated you." This acknowledgement, after years of feeling like I was imagining things, brought an unexpected lump to my throat. "Thank you for saying that. Mom's devastated, by the way. Keeps saying you misunderstood the seating arrangement." "There was nothing to misunderstand about a folding chair in the garage." "I know." Another pause. "Dad's angry. Says you humiliated them in front of everyone. But Kevin pointed out that they humiliated you first, and that shut him up temporarily." We talked for nearly an hour. For the first time, Amy seemed to be seeing our family dynamics clearly, without the filter of being the favorite. She couldn't fix anything, but her validation meant more than I could express. Kevin called that evening, his approach more direct, so I heard what went down after I got there. "The garage thing is completely messed up." "Yeah. Dad's telling everyone you overreacted, but I called bullshit on that. Told him if he'd been put in the garage, he'd have done worse than walk out." I smiled despite myself. Kevin had always been the most straightforward of us. "They're worried about what people will think," he continued. "All these relatives and friends witnessed their son walk out saying he'd been excluded. Doesn't fit the perfect family image they've crafted." Not my problem anymore. Respect, Kevin said simply. You going to talk to them anytime soon? Not planning on it. Can't blame you. Listen, this doesn't change anything between us, right? We still good. We're good, I assured him. The next week passed in a strange limbo. I returned to work finding solace in my photography. Friends provided support and distractions. My phone remained conspicuously silent from my parents' numbers. Trevor convinced me to join a therapy session, something I'd considered but never pursued. The therapist, Dr. Lena Wilson, specialized in family dynamics. In our first session, she listened to my story without judgment, then asked a question that shifted my perspective. What would you tell a friend who was treated this way by their family? The answer came immediately: to stop accepting it. To recognize their worth isn't determined by people who can't see their value. Exactly, she nodded. Now you need to tell yourself the same thing. 2 weeks after the anniversary party, I channeled my emotions into a new photography project exploring themes of belonging, exclusion, and found family. The images were raw and personal in a way my commercial work never could be. My agent saw the first few prints and immediately began discussions with galleries about an exhibition. The first direct contact from my parents came 19 days after the party. An email from my mother with the subject line, "We need to talk." The body contained just 3 sentences. "Your father and I are very hurt by your behavior at our anniversary. We've always supported you in everything you've done. Please call when you're ready to apologize." I showed it to Dr. Wilson at our next session. "Notice how there's no acknowledgement of your feelings or experience," she pointed out. "This is about their hurt, their narrative of support, and their expectation of an apology from you. So what do I do? What do you want to do?" I considered this carefully. Part of me wants to never speak to them again. Another part wants to try one more time to make them understand, but I don't know if that's possible. Those are both valid responses. The question is, which serves your well-being better in the long run? I didn't have an answer yet, but for the first time I was prioritizing my own well-being in relation to my family. That alone felt like progress. 2 months passed without direct contact from my parents. Amy and Kevin called regularly, creating a bridge that allowed family news to reach me without requiring direct interaction with our parents. Through them, I learned that my mother had told relatives I was going through a phase and would come around eventually. My father predictably had doubled down on his position that I had overreacted and embarrassed the family. "They're rewriting history," Amy explained during one of our calls. "According to Mom, they put you in the garage because you once mentioned liking quiet spaces away from crowds. Dad claims they were going to invite you to join everyone for the toasts, but you left before they could." "That's gaslighting," I replied, using a term Dr. Wilson had introduced me to. "They're trying to make me question my own experience." I know. Kevin and I both called them out on it, but they just changed the subject. These conversations with my siblings became an unexpected source of healing. Amy confessed that she had always been aware of the preferential treatment she received, but had been too uncomfortable to acknowledge it. It benefited me, so I didn't question it. I'm sorry for that, Brandon. Kevin, despite his status as the athletic son who followed our father's career path, shared his own struggles with parental expectations. They boxed me into this finance career because it's what Dad wanted. I've never told anyone this, but I hate it. I've been taking night classes in architecture for the past year. These revelations transformed my understanding of our family. My siblings hadn't been co-conspirators in my exclusion. They had been navigating their own complicated relationships with our parents' expectations and conditional approval. During this period, other family members began reaching out directly. My grandmother, my mother's mother, called one afternoon. "I need to tell you something, Brandon. I was at that anniversary party and what happened to you wasn't right. I should have said something at the time, but at 87 I've grown too accustomed to keeping the peace." Her acknowledgement brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you for saying that, Grandma. Your grandfather and I always thought you were brave to pursue your passion. He used to say you were the only one in the family with the courage to chart your own course." This conversation led to reconnections with other relatives who had witnessed similar treatment over the years but never spoken up. My cousin Eliza shared that at family gatherings, She had noticed how my parents would interrupt me or change the subject when I talked about my work. Uncle Peter admitted he had seen me being excluded from family photos and activities, but had dismissed it as coincidence until the garage incident made the pattern undeniable. I threw myself into my new photography project, which had evolved into a series titled Visible, Invisible. Each image explored the paradox of being physically present, yet emotionally erased within family structures. The work was deeply personal but resonated universally, touching on experiences many people had never articulated but immediately recognized. In September, 4 months after the anniversary party, the series debuted at a prestigious Chelsea gallery. The opening night drew critics, collectors, and a substantial crowd. Trevor and Julia helped organize the event, ensuring everything was perfect. As I stood surrounded by friends and colleagues praising work that had emerged from my pain, I felt a profound shift in my sense of self-worth. Midway through the evening, my agent pulled me aside. The Times critic is here and she's raving about the show, and that collector from San Francisco wants to discuss a commissioned series. The exhibition received glowing reviews, with the New York Times critic calling it a powerful exploration of familial alienation and the search for belonging. Sales exceeded expectations, and a museum in Chicago expressed interest in featuring the series the following year. This professional validation coincided with personal growth through continued therapy. Dr. Wilson helped me understand the concept of chosen family, the network of friends and supportive individuals who provide the unconditional acceptance that biological families sometimes cannot. Blood relationships come with pre-existing expectations and dynamics, she explained. Chosen family relationships are built on genuine connection and mutual respect from the beginning. I began to see how my friendships with Trevor and Julia, my relationship with my agent Rachel, who had believed in my vision for years, and the community of artists I had connected with in New York, had become my chosen family. These relationships nourished me in ways my biological family never had, appreciating me for exactly who I was, rather than measuring me against external standards. During this period, I also met Daniel, a literary editor, who attended my exhibition opening. Our connection was immediate and unlike any relationship I had experienced before. He understood the complexities of creative careers and family disappointments, having navigated similar terrain with his own parents, who had never accepted his sexuality. They wanted a different son than the one they got, he told me on our third date. It took me years to realize that's their loss, not mine. 6 months after the anniversary party, I felt ready to consider how to proceed with my parents. The distance had provided clarity, and therapy had given me tools to establish healthier boundaries. I no longer needed their approval to feel successful or worthy, but I had to decide whether to attempt rebuilding the relationship on new terms or to accept the estrangement as permanent. Kevin called with news that complicated this decision. Our father had experienced chest pains and undergone tests revealing moderate heart disease. He wasn't in immediate danger, but had been prescribed medication and lifestyle changes. He's using it to guilt everyone, Kevin reported. Keeps saying the stress of family problems contributed to his condition. Is he specifically blaming me? I asked. Not directly, but the implication is clear. Mom's more explicit. Told Amy your dramatic exit at the anniversary party was the beginning of his health issues. I discussed this development with Dr. Wilson. This is a common tactic, she advised. Health problems become a way to regain control and avoid accountability. The question is whether you're strong enough in your boundaries to engage without being manipulated. After careful consideration, I decided I was ready to have one conversation with my parents, not to repair everything, but to express my perspective clearly and establish boundaries for any future relationship. I drafted what Dr. Wilson called a boundary letter, outlining the patterns of behavior I would no longer accept and the conditions under which I would consider rebuilding a relationship. The upcoming Thanksgiving holiday loomed as a natural deadline for making contact. Amy had already called to discuss plans, mentioning awkwardly that our parents assumed I wouldn't be attending. Actually, I told her I think it's time we talked, but on my terms, not theirs. Exactly 6 months after the anniversary party, I sent my parents an email proposing a meeting at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant halfway between Boston and New York. I was clear that this wasn't about apologizing, but about establishing whether a healthier relationship was possible moving forward. Their response came from my mother 2 days later. "We're willing to meet. Your father's health hasn't been good, so please keep that in mind." The passive-aggressive implication wasn't lost on me, but I refused to take the bait. On a crisp November Saturday, I arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early, selecting a corner table that offered privacy without isolation. My parents walked in precisely on time, my father looking somewhat thinner than I remembered, but hardly the frail invalid my mother's message had implied. The initial greetings were awkward. No hugs, just stiff nods and uncomfortable smiles. After ordering drinks, an uncomfortable silence settled until my father cleared his throat. "Your mother and I have been doing a lot of thinking since the incident at our anniversary." "You mean since you seated me in the garage while everyone else was welcomed inside?" I corrected calmly. My mother's lips tightened. "Brandon, we've told you that wasn't our intention. We were trying to accommodate everyone and made what we now understand was a poor decision." "It wasn't just a poor decision, Mom. It was the culmination of a lifetime of similar decisions that communicated where I stood in the family hierarchy." My father shifted uncomfortably. "We've always supported you." "Dad, please don't start with that. We're not here to debate whether my experiences are valid. They are. The question is whether you're willing to acknowledge the pattern and commit to changing it." This direct approach was new for me, and I could see it caught them off guard. My father, unused to being interrupted, frowned but remained silent. "We've never meant to make you feel excluded," my mother said carefully. "We've always wanted what's best for you. What you've wanted is for me to be different than I am, to make choices that align with your values and expectations, regardless of my own passion and talents." My father sighed heavily. "Brandon, every parent has hopes for their children. We invested in your education, supported your move to New York." Reluctantly, I interjected, "And with constant reminders that you thought I was making a mistake. That's not support, Dad. That's conditional tolerance." The conversation continued in this vein through appetizers and main courses. My parents alternated between defensiveness and reluctant acknowledgement of specific incidents I brought up. My father grudgingly admitted that the garage seating had been inappropriate, though he maintained it wasn't intended as an insult. "Whether you intended it or not, the impact was clear," I explained, "and it reflected a pattern of behavior that has been consistent throughout my life." My mother, more perceptive than my father, eventually asked, "What do you want from us now, Brandon? Where do we go from here?" I had prepared for this question. I want a relationship based on mutual respect. That means acknowledging who I actually am, not who you wish I was. It means showing genuine interest in my career and life choices, even if they're different from what you would choose. It means treating me with the same consideration you show to Amy and Kevin. "And if we can't meet these expectations," my father asked, a defensive edge in his voice, "then we'll have a very limited relationship. I'm not willing to keep accepting the dynamic we've had for 32 years. The remainder of the meal was tense, but productive. We established specific guidelines for communication moving forward, including regular video calls where they would ask about my work without dismissive comments. I agreed to send updates about exhibitions and projects with the understanding that they would make an effort to engage meaningfully. As we prepared to leave, my mother asked hesitantly, "Will you come for Christmas?" "Not this year," I replied honestly. "I need more time and we need to establish a healthier pattern before I'm ready for family gatherings." Instead of the guilt trip I expected, she simply nodded. "We understand. Maybe we could visit New York in January. See where you live. Maybe your studio." This small gesture, offering to enter my world rather than just expecting me to fit into theirs, felt like the first genuine step toward change. The holidays passed quietly. I spent Thanksgiving with Daniel and his friends, experiencing a celebration free from underlying tension and unspoken resentments. For Christmas, Trevor and Julia hosted a gathering of holiday orphans, friends who for various reasons weren't spending the day with biological family. In January, true to their word, my parents visited New York. The trip wasn't without awkward moments, but they made visible efforts to engage with my world. My father asked questions about my photography techniques without immediately pivoting to discussions of financial stability. My mother admitted she had researched my recent exhibition online and read the reviews. When they met Daniel, their initial discomfort was evident but not insurmountable. By the end of dinner, my father was discussing literature with him, finding unexpected common ground. Over the following months, our relationship slowly evolved. Some patterns were deeply ingrained and resurfaced, periodically requiring gentle but firm correction. Other aspects improved steadily, particularly after Amy and Kevin began reinforcing the new dynamic during their own interactions with our parents. Easter marked my first return to the family home. I brought Daniel, establishing clearly that we would be staying at a hotel rather than in my old bedroom. The gathering was smaller than the anniversary party, just immediate family and grandparents, but still a significant test of our new boundaries. The dinner table held place settings for everyone, with no one relegated to secondary spaces. When conversation turned to careers, my mother made a point of asking about my upcoming projects before discussing Amy's hospital work or Kevin's architectural studies. These small adjustments reflected conscious effort, even if they sometimes felt slightly forced. Not every family relationship was salvageable. My aunt, my father's sister, remained convinced I had overreacted at the anniversary party and continued to make passive-aggressive comments. Rather than engaging in conflict, I simply limited my interaction with her, a boundary that preserved my peace of mind. 1 year after the garage incident, my exhibition, Visible, Invisible, had traveled to 3 cities and established me as a significant voice in contemporary photography. I had moved in with Daniel, finding in our relationship the unconditional acceptance I had sought from my family for so long. My circle of chosen family had expanded through meaningful friendships and professional connections based on genuine mutual respect. My relationship with my parents would never be perfect. 30-plus years of established patterns couldn't be erased completely, and there were still moments of tension and misunderstanding, but the dynamic had fundamentally changed. I was no longer seeking their approval or accepting mistreatment in hopes of eventually earning their respect. The most profound change wasn't in them, but in me. I had learned that self-worth must come from within, that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, but necessary, and that sometimes the hardest boundaries to establish are the ones that ultimately lead to healing. For anyone watching who recognizes their own family dynamics in my story, remember that you deserve to be valued exactly as you are. Sometimes the people who should love us unconditionally aren't capable of doing so, and that's about their limitations, not your worth. Building boundaries isn't about punishing others. It's about protecting yourself and creating space for healthier relationships to grow. If you've experienced similar family dynamics, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. How did you handle it? What boundaries have you created? Like and subscribe if this resonated with you, and share with someone who might need to hear that they deserve a seat at the table, not in the garage. Thank you for listening to my journey from exclusion to self-respect. Sometimes the most difficult confrontations lead to the most important growth. I'm grateful for every step of this path, even the painful ones, because they led me here to authenticity and true belonging.